The sun was beginning to set, tinting the sky of Beijing with shades of orange and purple, as I, Lian, found myself facing an unfinished mural. The vibrant colors of the paint I had chosen contrasted with the cold grey concrete of the city. But to me, that mural was more than just a simple artistic expression. It was a silent scream of frustration. I looked around and saw the frantic movement of people passing by in a hurry, each immersed in their own thoughts and problems. It was as if I were in a parallel world, observing from a distance, unable to connect with the reality that surrounded me. Why does no one stop to look? I thought, as I pressed the brush harder against the hard surface. With each stroke, I tried to vent the dissatisfaction that consumed me, the expectation of being a recognized artist, of bringing pride to my family, weighed on me like an anchor. But at the same time, there was a voice inside me whispering that I wasn't living the art I truly desired. What did I want? I just wanted to be happy. "Hey, you there?" A voice interrupted my daydream. It was a woman with short hair and colorful clothes who stopped in front of my mural. "What are you doing? This is amazing." I smiled shyly but soon closed off again. "Thank you," I murmured, not knowing how to continue the conversation. "But I don't know if it's worth it. No one cares about this." She looked at me with a penetrating gaze. "Don't worry about others. The beauty lies in doing something that speaks to your heart, not theirs." And before I could respond, she walked away, disappearing into the crowd. I stood there, frozen. Her words echoed in my mind, but doubt still weighed heavily. Why was it so difficult for me to break free from expectations? And as I reflected, frustration turned into despair. The pressure I felt was like a straitjacket, preventing me from being who I truly was. That night, darkness led me to a place that had always been my refuge, my grandmother's house. She had always been a source of inspiration and support, encouraging me to follow my dreams even when everything seemed to be falling apart. Upon entering her house, I was greeted by the familiar aroma of green tea and rice dumplings, which welcomed me like a warm hug. "Lian, my dear, I'm so glad you came." She smiled, her eyes shining with love and concern. "What's wrong?" "Oh, Grandma, I don't know. I feel lost. I can't find my place in this world, and art, which should bring me joy, only brings me anxiety." I let it slip, sitting at the table while she prepared a cup of tea. "Do you remember what I always said?" she asked, handing me the warm mug. "Happiness is in the little things, my love. Sometimes we need to stop running and just feel." "But how can I feel when everything seems so empty?" I retorted, frustration overflowing. "I want to be recognized. I want people to see what I do and care." She smiled, but there was sadness in her eyes. "Recognition is fleeting, Lian. What really matters is the connection you create with what you do, with yourself and with others. In art, as in life, you must let it flow. Don't cling to what you cannot control." Her words were like balm, but at the same time, they couldn't erase the anguish that consumed me, the connection. How can I find that if I'm so lost? After a while, I said goodbye to my grandmother, leaving her house with my mind still confused. The way back home was familiar, but that night, everything felt different. The city was illuminated, but the light was not enough to warm my heart. As I walked, something caught my attention. An old man sitting on a bench, observing the movement of the street. It was Cheng, a wise man I had encountered a few times. He always had a welcoming smile and a look that seemed to see beyond the surface. "Good evening, Lian," he said, as if he knew exactly what I was going through. "What brings you here at this hour?" I'm trying to understand myself and what it means to be happy," I replied hesitantly. "But it's so hard. I feel like I'm stuck in an endless search." Chung looked at the mural I had made and then turned his attention back to me. "Happiness is like water. It flows when we don't hold it tightly. You're holding it so tightly that you can't see what's right in front of you. Those words resonated within me, but I couldn't fully comprehend them. How can I let go of something that feels so distant? You need to learn to let go, to trust the flow of life, he said, with the serenity of someone who had seen much. Sometimes what we seek is hidden in the little things, in the simplicity of everyday life. I stood in silence, absorbing his words. It felt like he had shed light on the darkness I was in, but I still couldn't see the path ahead. And if I don't know how to let go? Chung smiled gently. The journey begins with a step. Allow yourself to feel, allow yourself to live. Happiness is not a destination, but a way of traveling. The conversation flowed, but my mind was still tangled in doubts. I got up, thanked him, and began to walk away, but his phrase kept echoing. Happiness is like water. What did that really mean? As I walked under the city lights, I realized that the search for happiness was not a straight line, but a complex web of experiences, emotions, and connections. And perhaps I needed to dive deeper into myself to find what truly mattered. With a heavy heart, yet slightly illuminated by Chung's words, I returned home, determined to reflect on everything I had experienced that day. Life was a palette of colors, and I was just beginning to discover which shades I could truly use. The morning light filtered through the leaves of the trees, creating a dancing pattern of shadows on the ground. I decided to follow Chung's advice, even though anxiety still pulsed in my chest like a frantic drum. Happiness is like water, he had said, but how could I loosen the ties of my own mind? The voices of society, the expectations of family, all echoed in my head like a dissonant choir. I took a deep breath and headed to the studio. On the way, I encountered a group of young artists in a park. They were gathered around a table, laughing and discussing their works. A part of me wanted to join them, but another part hesitated. As I approached, I heard one of them, a disheveled-haired boy with a critical gaze, commenting on a mural I had recently painted. Lian. He really thinks he can call himself an artist. That piece is so lifeless, he said, laughing with a group of others. A weight fell in my stomach. I couldn't shake the insecurity those words provoked. With a nervous smile, I stepped closer, trying to appear confident. "Hi, everyone. What are you discussing?" I asked, forcing a carefree tone. The young man who had spoken looked at me, his eyes shining with a mix of disdain and curiosity. "We're just commenting on real art. You know, the thing you're trying to do, your mural. Well, it's just an attempt, isn't it?" The laughter of the others cut like a blade. A warmth rose in my face, and I felt the urge to defend myself, to explain that every brushstroke had meaning, that each color represented something deep to me. Instead, I just smiled, a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Yeah, I'm trying to find my style." "Well, maybe you should just keep trying," he replied sarcastically, turning back to the others, leaving me standing there like a spectator of my own life. What was I really doing? Trying to please whom? I left the park with an even stronger sense of emptiness. Chung's words echoed in my mind. Happiness is like water. I needed to understand that, but how? The pressure to succeed consumed me, and when I looked at my studio, I saw the blank canvas staring back at me like an abyss. I needed help. I decided to visit a nearby Buddhist temple. The air there was fresh and scented with incense, and tranquility enveloped every corner. I found an elderly monk sitting on a bench, his eyes deep and serene. He looked at me as if he knew my internal struggles. "You seem lost, young artist," he said, his voice soft and comforting. "Yes, I don't know what to do. People don't believe in what I do, and it makes me insecure," I confessed, feeling a knot unravel in my throat. The monk smiled, a smile that seemed to illuminate the entire temple. Happiness is a flower that blooms in the present moment. You are so focused on what others think that you have forgotten to live in the now. But how can I detach from that? How can I find my true essence if all I see are critiques? He stood up, walking slowly toward a garden filled with flowers. Life is impermanent. Each moment is unique, and beauty lies in accepting it. Critiques are merely a reflection of others' perceptions. You must cultivate your own garden. I looked at the flowers around us, their vibrant colors, and the way they danced with the wind. So you're saying I should focus on myself instead of worrying about what others think? Exactly, Lian. True art comes from within. When you connect with your essence, happiness flows like water. Those words resonated within me, but doubt still lingered. I wanted to believe, but the emptiness inside me was still palpable. I thanked the monk and left the temple, trying to internalize his lessons. What did it really mean to live in the present moment? Back in my studio, I looked at the blank canvas. Something inside me wanted to scream, wanted the paint to flow like the words the monk had shared. But doubt was still there, like a specter that wouldn't fade away. I sat in front of the canvas, brushes around me, and recalled Chung's phrase and what the monk said about impermanence. I decided it was time to try. I picked up a brush and dipped it in the paint. The first stroke was hesitant, but soon the energy began to flow. Each movement was a small cry of liberation, and the canvas began to come to life. I was no longer thinking about the critiques or expectations. I was just creating. As I painted, a sense of peace began to fill the emptiness. The sunlight streamed through the window, creating a magical and welcoming atmosphere. The smell of paint and paper mingled with the aroma of spring entering through the window. I was present. Each color, each stroke was an expression of who I was. I remembered the monk's words and realized that happiness was, in fact, in that moment. But even while painting, the shadow of doubt still loomed over me. What would others think? What if I was just wasting time? I looked at the canvas, now vibrant with colors, and reflected on how I had always sought validation. What really mattered? I continued to work, each stroke becoming more confident. In the back of my mind, two voices were battling. One told me I should care about what others thought, while the other insisted that true art came from within. And in that internal conflict, I found a glimmer of clarity. When I finally set the brush down, I looked at the finished piece. It was a representation not only of myself, but of everything I had learned so far. Happiness was not in pleasing others, but in expressing myself freely. The emptiness that accompanied me began to dissipate, like a fog being dispersed by the morning sun. Although there was still a long way to go, I knew that this was a small step towards something greater. The word happiness was starting to take on a new meaning. And as I lost myself in the beauty of the painting, I realized that perhaps, just perhaps, true happiness might be right in front of me, waiting to be discovered in every moment. That night, I found myself immersed in a vivid and strange dream. The image of a flower blooming danced in my mind, full of vibrant colors, each petal an explosion of life and beauty. I felt an inexplicable peace, as if the flower was not just a plant, but the very essence of happiness that I had been seeking for so long. Upon waking, the soft morning light filtered through the window, and a feeling of renewal filled my being. What I needed, I realized, was to understand more about happiness. It was not just a fleeting emotion or a state of mind. It was something deep, something I had neglected in my frantic search for recognition and success. I got out of bed with renewed determination, and after getting ready, decided that I needed to find Chung again. He had left an indelible impression on me, and his words echoed in my mind. Happiness is like water. It flows when we do not hold it tightly. What did that really mean? I was willing to find out. I arrived at the park where I often met Chung, and to my delight, I saw him sitting on his usual bench, watching the leaves gently fall from the trees. As I approached, he looked up and smiled. "Ah, Lian, you seem different today. What happened?" "I dreamed of a flower, Chung, and now I feel that I need to understand more about happiness. Can you help me with that?" My voice overflowed with anxiety and hope. Chung nodded, as if he had been waiting for this question. "Happiness, my young friend, is a journey made in company. Today, I will be accompanying a group of pilgrims. Would you like to join us?" I hesitated for a moment. The idea of walking with strangers seemed intimidating, but curiosity was stronger. "Yes, I would like to. What should I do?" "Come then. We will meet the group at the temple. They are simple people, but full of stories and wisdom." Chung got up, and together we began to walk. The walk to the temple was filled with small conversations and laughter. Chung talked about the people we would meet, their lives and their struggles. He described a pilgrim who had lost everything but still wore a smile on his face. That intrigued me. How could someone be happy without possessions? When we arrived at the temple, a group of pilgrims was already gathering, all looking cheerful and excited. I was welcomed with warm smiles and curious looks. It was as if their positive energy enveloped me in a warm and welcoming embrace. Chung introduced me to each of them, and soon I realized that they were not just pilgrims. They were seekers of happiness, just like me. During the journey, we walked through lush landscapes, passing green fields and crystal-clear streams. The scent of the earth and flowers was invigorating. We talked about everything: art, life, dreams, and challenges. Each person had their own story, and I felt increasingly inspired. One of the pilgrims, an elderly woman named May, shared her experience. "I lost my husband and, with him, most of my possessions. But I did not lose my happiness. It was not in material things, but in the memories we created together." Those words resonated within me. Happiness was not something I could acquire. It was a construction made of moments, experiences, and connections. As we walked, I realized that the simplicity of the journey was richer than any art gallery I could imagine. The laughter, the shared stories, the warmth of human connection, these were becoming a form of art in themselves. At the end of the day, we gathered around a campfire. The flames danced under the starry sky, and the atmosphere was magical. One of the pilgrims, a middle-aged man named Jian, began to tell a story that captured my attention. He spoke of an acquaintance who had decided to give up his material possessions in search of a more meaningful life. He realized that happiness was not in having, but in being. By letting go of things, he found a freedom he never knew existed. As he spoke, I felt each word penetrate my heart. Jian's story touched a sensitive chord within me. I asked him, but how did he deal with societal pressure, with everyone's expectations around him? Jian smiled. "Pressure will always exist, Lian. The secret is to learn to listen to yourself. Sometimes we need to step away from the external noise to hear our own voice. Happiness is a choice, and he chose to liberate himself." Reflecting on those words, I realized that I too had allowed others' expectations to shape my pursuit of happiness. I was so worried about pleasing society that I had lost sight of what truly mattered to me. The connection with others, authenticity, and the expression of my true self were lost amid the chaos. At the end of the night, as the campfire flames dimmed and the sky grew darker, I looked around and saw the faces of the pilgrims illuminated by the soft light. They were there, together, sharing a moment of communion and joy. I felt a wave of gratitude flood my heart. Happiness was not just a destination, it was the journey, the companionship, the stories we shared. I was beginning to understand. When the bonfire finally extinguished and the pilgrims began to disperse, Chung approached me. "What did you learn today, Lian?" I looked into his eyes, feeling lighter. "I learned that happiness is not in the things we own, but in the experiences we live and the connections we make. Simplicity and authenticity are more valuable than any material success." Chung smiled, satisfied. "You are on the right path, my young friend. Keep searching, and you will find the happiness you desire." As I walked back home that night, I felt a new phase of my life beginning. The journey with the pilgrims, the shared stories, and the lessons learned were intertwining within me, profoundly changing my perspective. I was ready to reevaluate my priorities and seek a life that reflected not only who I wanted to be, but who I really was. The cool breeze of Beijing enveloped me as I returned to the city, a stark contrast to the warmth of the experiences I had lived during the pilgrimage. Chung's teachings and the genuine smiles of the pilgrims still echoed in my mind. But as soon as I stepped onto the familiar streets, a wave of anxiety hit me. The pressure to stand out in the art world seemed to have become an even more unbearable weight. I wondered if I could truly apply the lessons I had learned, or if society would swallow me back into its expectations of success and recognition. I walked through the streets, observing the windows of art galleries, each one more pretentious than the last. The glow of the lights reflected the superficiality I feared. Happiness is like water. It flows when we don't hold it too tightly. Cheng's words still resonated within me, but it was hard not to be swept away by the currents of ambition and comparison. The world around me seemed to scream that I needed to be the best, that outside validation was the only path to happiness. The pressure increased when Wei, my friend and fellow artist, reached out to me. He had a proposal, an exhibition in a renowned gallery. "Lian, this is your chance. You have to show your work to the world. You are talented, and people need to see that." The excitement in his voice was palpable, but inside, I was in conflict. The idea of showcasing my work in such a prestigious space was tempting, but also terrifying. "I don't know, Wei. What if what I create isn't good enough? What if I lose my essence in the process?" Insecurity showed in my voice, and Wei frowned. "You are the artist, Lian. You have to trust yourself. Don't let doubt prevent you from shining. Think about the opportunities this could bring." He was right, in a way. The opportunity was seductive, but the fear of losing myself in the pursuit of recognition was even stronger. I wanted my art to speak for me. But what if, in trying to please, I ended up losing what truly mattered? The pressure to decide mounted, and I felt trapped between two worlds. Art should be an extension of me, a reflection of my personal journey, but the expectation to be applauded and admired left me anxious. I knew I needed to find a balance between following my heart and meeting the demands of the outside world. On the eve of the exhibition, I was at home, surrounded by paints and brushes, but creativity seemed to have abandoned me. The room was silent, except for the sound of my heavy breathing and the pounding of my heart, echoing like a drum in my mind. I couldn't stop thinking about the gallery, the people who would judge me, and the expectations weighing on my shoulders. What did I really want to express? And how could I do that without losing myself in the quest for approval? When the sun set, I decided I needed some clarity. I left home and went to the park where I had first met Chung. I wanted to talk to him, to hear his wise words one more time. I walked slowly, watching the city lights flicker like stars. When I reached the bench where I used to find him, my heart raced at seeing him there, sitting peacefully as if waiting for me. "Lian," he said, with a warm smile that immediately calmed me. "What brings you here tonight?" "Chung, I'm confused. Tomorrow is my exhibition, and I don't know if I should go through with it. The pressure is immense, and I'm afraid of losing my authenticity." The words spilled out of me like a confession, and the frustration I felt began to dissipate as I spoke. He looked at me with understanding, and after a moment of silence he replied, "True happiness does not come from recognition, but from connection with others." That phrase struck me like lightning. I was so focused on how people would see me that I had forgotten what truly mattered, my connection to the art and to those who would appreciate it. But how can I do that in a gallery where everyone is just thinking about their own ambitions? I asked, still wrestling with doubt. Chung smiled, as if he knew what I needed to hear. Connection doesn't only happen on big stages, Lian. It can be found in every brushstroke, in every emotion you express. If you create from your heart, those who truly matter will feel it. Art has the power to bring people together, to touch their souls. Don't worry about recognition. Worry about being true to yourself. I took a deep breath, feeling a wave of relief wash over me as I heard his words. The truth was that I had lost sight of what motivated me to create. Art was my language, my way of connecting with the world, and it shouldn't be a means to seek validation. I talked a bit more with Chung, exchanging ideas about what I could include in my exhibition. He reminded me that every piece I created should be a reflection not only of myself, but of all the experiences and lessons I had accumulated. When we finally said goodbye, I felt a new determination within me. The pressure was still there, but now I had a direction. I wanted to create something that wasn't just meant to be admired, but that truly spoke to people's hearts. With the dawn, I sat in front of the blank canvas, a new sense of purpose guiding me. I wanted each brushstroke to tell a story, each color to express an emotion. As I worked, the memories of the pilgrimage and Chung's lessons flowed through me like water from a river that had finally found its way. It was a liberating process, and I felt more connected to my art than ever. The eve of the exhibition passed, and I knew that, regardless of what happened, I had found something precious, a way to be true to myself. And as I looked at my final work, I realized that happiness wasn't about being recognized, but about simply being. The atmosphere of the gallery was charged with expectation and glamour, but for me, everything felt distant and cold. As I crossed the door, I was enveloped by a wave of murmurs and laughter, the walls adorned with vibrant and impressive artworks. Yet, I felt like a spectator in a world to which I didn't belong. The glow of the lights reflected off smiling faces while I stood in a corner, observing. The final touch on my piece, which had been made with so much love and dedication, now felt like a distant memory. I looked at the people around me, artists being praised for their creations, and I asked myself if this was really the kind of happiness I was seeking. That superficial recognition felt like a breath of wind, something that passed quickly and left nothing but an empty echo. What was happiness after all? Was it being applauded by strangers, or was it something deeper, rooted in the connections we form throughout life? I was in a labyrinth of doubts, and the exit seemed increasingly distant. As I walked through the space, my thoughts were far from the lively conversation around. A familiar voice caught my attention. It was Wei, my friend. He was surrounded by admirers, all commenting on his latest exhibition. He saw me and waved, smiling contagiously. I tried to return the smile, but it barely reached my lips. "Hey, Lian, look at this! Your work is getting attention," he exclaimed excitedly. "Yeah, I guess," I replied, trying to maintain an enthusiastic tone, but feeling a weight in my chest. "How are you feeling?" "Great! It's exactly what I've always dreamed of. And you? Ready to shine?" He winked, but the wink didn't manage to light up my soul. "Actually, I'm wondering if this is really what I want," I confessed, feeling the need to vent. "Looking at these works, these people, makes me question if I belong here." Wei frowned, concerned. "What do you mean? You're an amazing artist, Lian. Your work deserves to be seen." Maybe, but the feeling of being praised by a crowd can't be the only reason to create, I replied, my voice trembling. I want my art to mean something more than that. You're overthinking, man. Just enjoy the moment, he smiled, but his expression didn't comfort me. I looked around, feeling the pressure increase. I decided to step away from the buzz, seeking a quieter corner in the gallery. I found a small side room where some works were displayed in silence. The atmosphere was calmer and I could breathe a little easier. As I examined an abstract painting, a soft voice cut through the silence. This piece is fascinating, isn't it? The woman speaking stood in front of a painting I knew well. It was one of mine, but it wasn't just the work that caught her attention. It was the way she observed it. Her eyes shone with sincerity. Yes, it's one of mine, I replied, a bit surprised by the compliment. Did you really like it? I like the vulnerability it conveys, she said with a genuine smile. Beauty lies in vulnerability. That's what touches people. Her words resonated within me like a bell. I had always sought perfection, but perhaps what really mattered was authenticity. The vulnerability she mentioned was something I had been afraid to expose, something I hid behind layers of expectation and insecurity. I never thought of it that way, I confessed, feeling an instant connection with that stranger. I've always sought acceptance through technique, through beauty, but perhaps I've forgotten to truly show myself. That happens to many artists, she replied, her voice soft and encouraging. Sometimes what we need is to allow ourselves to be imperfect. The most moving art is the one that reveals us, that makes us feel something genuine. You're right. I've spent so much time trying to please others that I lost myself in the process, I said, reflecting on everything I had experienced up to that moment. I want to be myself again. The woman smiled as if she knew exactly what I felt. Then do that. Go back to what makes you happy, what makes you feel free. Happiness is a state of mind, not a prize to be won. Those words touched me deeply. I'd always known that happiness was something that should come from within, but hearing it from someone who seemed to understand my dilemma gave me a new drive. I needed to return to the mural, that place where I expressed myself without fear, where art flowed like water. Thank you, I said, feeling a wave of gratitude. I really appreciate your words. No need to thank me. I'm just reminding you of what many forget. She gave a gentle smile and stepped away, leaving me with a restless mind. Those words echoed in my head like a soft song that didn't want to be silenced. What I sought was not recognition, but connection. And I had to find that again. Leaving the gallery felt like breathing fresh air after being trapped in a suffocating environment. The world outside was vibrant, and I felt I needed those colors, that life. I walked through familiar streets, feeling each step take me back to myself. The mural was calling me, and it was time to respond. Upon arriving at the site, I was greeted by the sight of the grey wall that had become my refuge. I picked up the paints, which no longer felt so heavy in my hands. Each brushstroke now carried a new intention. I wanted to free myself from the constraints that social pressure had created within me. As I painted, the image of a blooming flower began to take shape. It was a representation of transformation, vulnerability, and the beauty hidden within imperfections. I remembered the woman's words and what Chung always said, "Happiness is like water. It flows when we don't hold it too tightly." This fluidity was the key to my art, and I was ready to let it flow. "That's beautiful, Lian." A familiar voice interrupted my thoughts. It was Wei, who had come back to see me. "Have you finally decided to start working again?" "Yes, I'm trying to find my essence again," I replied as my hands danced over the surface of the mural. "I want this to represent who I am, not who others want me to be." I knew you would come back to do something amazing. He looked at the mural with admiration. And this is already amazing. Thank you, Wei. That means a lot to me. As I painted, I felt each layer of paint blend together, forming not just an image, but a part of me that had been hidden. Hours passed like minutes, and the mural began to come to life. Each color, each shape, told a story. My story. Happiness was not something to be achieved. It was something to be lived, shared, and above all, expressed. The sun began to set, tinting the sky with orange and violet hues as I contemplated my mural, finally finished. It was a masterpiece that reflected the journey I had taken thus far. Each brushstroke contained a fraction of my soul, a visual representation of my struggles and discoveries. The image of a blooming flower, which I had dreamed of that night, dominated the center of the canvas, surrounded by vibrant colors, symbolizing the joy and sadness that had coexisted in my life. I realized that happiness was not a fixed state, but a dance between light and shadow. I decided to organize a small outdoor exhibition, inviting friends and strangers to come see my new creation. The idea of sharing my work, exposing my essence in such a vulnerable way, made me nervous. But the excitement outweighed the fear. After all, I had learned that true happiness was in connecting with others, and this was my chance to do so. With the help of Wei and other friends, we set up the event in a nearby park. People began to arrive, and a wave of nervousness and anticipation washed over me. The space was filled with laughter, conversation, and the aroma of street food, creating a vibrant atmosphere. As people admired my mural, I moved through the crowd, listening to their comments and smiles. It was a magical experience. "Lian, you really outdid yourself," Wei exclaimed, admiring every detail of the work. "This flower is beautiful. You captured something profound here." "Thank you, Wei," I smiled, feeling a warmth in my chest. It's as if each color tells a part of my story. While we talked, I spotted Chung approaching. My heart raced. It felt as if he were a familiar presence amid all that excitement. With his calm and wise demeanor, he came closer, his eyes shining with approval. "Lian, my young artist, your work is magnificent," Chung said, observing the mural closely. "You managed to convey the essence of your journey brilliantly." "Cheng!" I exclaimed, moved. "I wouldn't have gotten here without your words. The phrase about happiness, it changed everything for me." He smiled wisely, his eyes seeming to see through me. Happiness is a journey, not a destination. You realize this by sharing your art with others. And as we talked, I noticed that the crowd around us became a tangle of voices and laughter. People interacted with the mural, discussing their impressions and feelings, and I felt increasingly part of that community. It was as if happiness was floating in the air, connecting each of us in an inexplicable way. In a corner, I heard two strangers discussing the artwork. One of them commented on the phrase I admired so much. "Have you heard that enigmatic saying? Happiness is like water. It flows when we don't hold it too tightly," one of them said. The other nodded, looking intrigued. "Yes, I heard it from an old sage in Beijing. He said that happiness should not be forced, but accepted as a gift that flows into our lives." My heart raced. That old sage was Cheng. I stood still, listening to their conversation, feeling a deep connection to those words. Happiness was not just an abstract idea or a goal to be reached. It was something that manifested in interactions, in the small joys of everyday life. "I didn't know that phrase had an author," said the first man, "but it makes complete sense. Sometimes we worry so much about being happy that we end up drifting away from what really matters." I was about to step forward and introduce myself, but something held me back. Instead, I watched as the two continued to talk. a smile blooming on my face. It was as if I were watching a play where Chung's words reverberated in the lives of others, just as they had in mine. Their conversation made me reflect on my own journey. Happiness was not something I could possess or control. It was a state of mind that sprang from connection with others, from the vulnerability of sharing my experiences, from opening my heart. "Lian!" Wei called me, interrupting my thoughts. "Come here. The folks are asking you to say something about the mural." I felt a flutter in my stomach, but at the same time, a wave of courage washed over me. I walked to the front of the crowd, taking a deep breath. When I looked at the gathered people, I noticed the variety of faces, some smiling, others contemplative. In that moment, I realized that my art was not just about me. It was a bridge to something greater. "Hey, everyone," I said, my voice a little shaky but full of sincerity. "Thank you for being here. This mural represents my journey in search of happiness. I've learned that it's not found in great achievements, but in the small connections we make along the way." The people began to applaud, and a wave of encouragement enveloped me. I want to share that the phrase that impacted me the most was one I heard from a wise person in Beijing. "Happiness is like water. It flows when we don't hold on to it tightly." This helped me understand that true happiness is something to be shared, not something to possess. The crowd murmured in agreement, and I realized many were reflecting on their own experiences. Chung watched me with a serene smile, and that gave me even more confidence to continue. Art is a form of expression, but more than that, it's a way of connecting. I hope that when you look at this mural, you feel a piece of the joy and pain I experienced. And remember that each of us has our own journey in search of happiness. When I finished, genuine applause echoed around me. I looked at the faces and saw not just admiration, but also identification. I had managed to touch their souls in some way, and the happiness I had long sought radiated in those exchanges. Chung approached and in a whisper said, "You've found the true essence of happiness, Lian. It's not in your works, but in the connections you create. Always remember that." In that moment, Chung's message crystallized in my heart. Happiness was not a distant goal, but an experience lived in communion with others, in the simple and profound exchanges we made. I looked at my mural one last time and smiled, not just for it, but for everything it represented. The journey was just beginning, and now I knew I was not alone. Now, let's take a brief reflection. This story teaches us that true happiness is not found in the things we possess or in the opinions of others, but in our ability to connect with the present and express our authenticity. Just as Lian learned to let go of society's constraints and external expectations, we too can find peace by focusing on what truly matters, living with truth and simplicity. Happiness flows like water, and the less we try to control it, the more it appears naturally in our lives. What did you think of this story? What lesson do you take for your own journey? Leave your comment, as we want to know your reflection. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories like this, and get ready to be even more surprised by the upcoming videos. Until then,